Hi, sophomores. How's it going today? Here we are in our last full week of school for the very bizarre 2020 school year. And we've got 3 chapters left in Outliers and then an epilogue. So for today, we're going to be considering chapters 7 and 8. And I'll be honest with you, I probably learn the most from my discussions about students for their experiences with chapters 7 and 8. So we've looked at part 1 of the text. We've looked at opportunity. And now we're moving into cultural legacy, as we mentioned. We looked at the way the culture of honor, in particular in Harlan, Kentucky, affects the way that people are aggressive or kind towards each other, and we found that that persists over generations. Today we're going to talk, and tomorrow, in chapters 7 and 8, we're going to talk about the way that cultural formality, in particular as evidenced by language use, can affect the way we experience our lives. So, the chapter title, The Ethnic Theory of Plane Crashes, is interesting. Ethnic is a word that I find to be a little confusing. It tends to often mean non-white in Western culture, but in this particular case, I want to be just a little more specific. What Gladwell is sharing in this chapter is that the way some languages are structured, the increasing amount of formality in the way that some people speak to different groups of people within a language can affect the way that we live our lives culturally. So Gladwell gives us 2 different airplane crashes. Now, I don't know about you, but I miss traveling quite a bit, but I still am quite afraid of airplanes. I've been everywhere, but airplanes are a necessary evil in my mind. Maybe you love them. Good for you. You're quite free. Here's the deal, though. Gladwell asserts that both on Korean Air Flight 801, the cultural formality that relates to the way that people need to pay deference to their superiors, their perceived superiors within culture, can ultimately be dangerous. As Gladwell talks about Avianca Flight 52, okay, and he talks about the way that deferential sort of attitudes within that particular airplane led to a plane crash as well. We're going to be considering a couple of important ideas. Ultimately, as you read, you're probably going to be thinking about all the different languages you speak. Maybe, unfortunately, like myself, you only speak one. What I often hear from the students who speak other languages, in particular Korean students, speak up with this chapter as a result of the evidence Gladwell chose to use. And Korean students often speak about the way that they need to use different word choice with different groups of people to show different types of formality. And I've learned a lot about the way that English doesn't do that by learning about the way that, in particular, some Asian languages do. So you also might go ahead and consider a couple of ways that the way that you use language might be interesting. Consider the way that you vary your linguistic formality as you speak English based on your audience, based on the age of your audience, perhaps the gender of your audience, perhaps the extent to which you know those people. And you're also going to want to consider, again, considering the idea of Washington cultural legacy. An anecdote that Doran and I always tell is that, often, Doran and I refer to ourselves as Doran and Matheny. You don't spend a lot of time being like, Mrs. Matheny, Mr. Doran. You can, it doesn't bother us. Go big. But most of the time, people just are like, Doran, Matheny. And once we had one of the secretaries who doesn't work at the school anymore, this administrative assistant came up to us and said, hey, I just feel like the kids are showing you disrespect because they're not calling you Mr. Doran and Mrs. Matheny. And I just want to let you know that they're not doing that so you can get the proper respect. And I was quite boggled because I did feel like I was being respected. I didn't need that sort of Ms. or Mrs. sort of piece before the name to feel respect, but a different generation might have needed that. So how does the way that we inhabit our cultural legacy, what does that have to do with language? So what I'd like you guys to do is I'd like you to go ahead and I'd like you to read chapter 7. I want to warn you, chapter 7 is quite long. But again, those who push through, I think, do pretty well with it. So I'd like you guys to go ahead and do the reading of chapter 7. Now, I'm not going to make you do this fun quiz today, but because again, I know this is going to take way more than your essential learning time to read this chapter, but I want you to consider that you'll really get this by the end of the text. Gladwell asserts that Korea's strict cultural hegemony influences language use. So what is his argument there? And then in chapter 7, what does Gladwell assert are the implications of language formality for, in particular, airline pilots? you'd cite a specific example in your response. This would have been your exit slip, my friends, had we all had essential learning. But because I am limited in time, and I am already going way over that, all you need to do today is have watched this video and then go ahead and read chapter 7. As you move into tomorrow for your essential learning, we're going to be reading probably the most fascinating chapter for me, rice paddies and math tests. It goes ahead and it explores why oftentimes we see students from Asia exceeding their white peers and their brown peers in math. Statistically, this has been a fact. Here is Gladwell's argument about language, which you may buy and you may not. At the end of your reading tomorrow, there will be a little bit of an assignment, guys. Thanks, everybody. Read on, and I can't wait to hear what you think about this tomorrow.